So welcome back. Now we're going to build the empty bucket mover. It's going to move the buckets back onto the main load wheel. So let's get started. Initially it's a very basic build just for some of the basic mechanisms. You'll also notice in this build there's not a lot of pins. So unlike the other sections of this machine, this part does not have a lot of pins. Now when I was initially building this, I didn't have all the right pieces. And when this bucket unloader would go to unload the buckets, the part that I was using to have him lift the buckets wasn't quite right, and so he would kind of bob up and down as he unloaded the buckets, and so Mrs. the Rebreaker called him Bob. So we're going to build Bob the bucket unloader. I'm going to use these cams. We're going to go right in the middle of the cam. So you can see there where we're going. And we need 2 of those. I want to make sure that's right flush. We're going to go through the second hole. And on this side, a 40-tooth gear. And again, make sure it's not tight and smooth on that side. So we'll take a frictionless pin with an axle on one side, and we'll put it in that top hole. Alright. This is a 5-stud axle, 9-stud beam, and a bushing. Oh, no, not a bushing. Just a second. Connector, it just moves, and a bushing. There we go. And we'll go with a 9-stud axle. And this is very important. This is a connector, but it's only a half connector. And the reason why is when the load wheel turns, the clearance on it is so tight. This has to be that. And a 1.5 pin to connect it here, just like that. Of course, miss a piece. This is how we learn. On here, what makes this move? This guy. And he goes on like that. And connect that back up. Now, the pinhole. Now this is from Akiyuki's video, this is his quick return mechanism. Okay, so pretty straightforward. We can set that aside. Actually, no, let's add a little more to it. There's a 10-stud axle we're going to stick through, and on that axle we're going to put an 8-tooth gear. I try to use these reinforced, the new reinforced 8-tooth gears, just they're better. They handle the load better. This is going to stick through because this end is going to go off to our next mechanism. Alright, so one of those on there, and of course the kind of gear that you always stick in here. We'll take an 8-stud axle and the crown gear that goes on this one. Just slide that in. So right now things are going to be a little unstable. This is going to sit this way. Lots more to come. So we'll set that aside. And we'll build some more of the small outline parts. Okay. So that's a 1x6 brick, 1x6 plate, 1x6 Technic brick, 1x6 plate on top of that, a second 1x6 plate on top of that one, 1x6 brick, or Technic brick, and make it look good. We'll build exactly one more of those. Brick, plate, Technic brick, plate, plate, Technic brick, tile. We'll take 1x4 lever. And since they're half, we're going to double them up. We want to use the axle hole that's in there. And we'll take a 4-stud axle. And we'll go just in. And on one of these, put it in the second hole. And on this side, put a 24-tooth gear. Again, making sure that there's no friction, that it spins quite freely, and it'll stick out the width of one Technic brick. And then we'll grab another 4-stud axle, and this gear mates up right there. We make sure it doesn't stick out, that they do work with each other, and this attaches on the other side. Pretty straightforward. Now on here, use one of these connectors with the axle hole in both sections of it, and the way it lines up is when this is pointed straight up, this should be pointed straight up. There we go, see, pretty darn close. And that's how we want those to line up. So, let's set that aside. Alright, to build the first side of the main part of the frame, 1x6 brick, 1x4. Now, don't get confused. We've got over here 1x2 with cross holes for Technic bricks, and 1x2 with regular holes. So, this is a 1x2 with a regular hole, and a 1x6. On top of that, we've got a 1x2 tile, a modified tile, 1x2, or plate, sorry, and this is 1x2 plate. Modified plate with single stud on top, and then a 1x2 plate. Another 1x2 Technic brick with a hole. A 2x2 brick. Since we're here, let's get this 1x2 tile on there. And then it's a 1x3 brick. And a 1x3 slope. I've got these in black. I'm still waiting for my dark bluish gray ones to show up. Actually, while we're here, let's put this in. So this is our 13 stud beam, and that actually just attaches right onto that stud right there. Just like that. Now on top of that, we go with a 1x4 plate, another 1x4 plate. Now these are the Technic 1x2s with cross holes. 1, 2, and make it look nice and good, nice and smooth. There we go, there's one side. So we'll set that aside. Looks like we're getting quite the collection of parts. Now to build the other side. So the first layer we'll just build here on the table. wire. So it's a 4x4 brick. We'll go with a 1x2 brick. A 1x4. A 1x2. A 1x8. Wait a second. Now, let me back up just a touch here. It's not a 1x4 and a 1x2. It's actually a 1x2 Technic brick, and then a 1x4. 1x8. 1x4. And then on top of that, now more of these modified tiles. This side is more solid because one of the Technic beams is actually going to be cantilevered out, so I'm going to make sure it's going to be solid enough to support it. So you can start to see how Bob comes together. Now this is a 9-stud beam, just like that, and then we keep building up. Okay guys, really sorry, I gotta make a change here on this part here. I did a last minute change, that's why I didn't catch this. So, taking out that 1x6 at the bottom here, replacing it with a 1x1 or 1x2. Because that's all that's necessary there. And a 1x4. I know, shows bad planning on my part, and I apologize. Everything still works the same. So if you did put a 1x6 in there, totally okay. It just won't match with the parts listing at the beginning of the video. Because this 1x6 goes right here. Again, I'm sorry. Hopefully I don't get too many dislikes on this video. The room we need to, you guessed it, make it look good. All the while putting in the right pieces in all the right places. One by 4 tile, because it's got to be the same height as the other side. I don't know what I was thinking there. 1x4 plate. And then 2 of these 1x2 Technic pieces. And a 1x4 tile. That's the frame of Bob without all of his working pieces inside just yet. Okay, so that one we can set aside. Alright, let's get Bob going here. Cross block. 1x3. Cross block going across. And a 1x3. So on the top one, actually, we're going to put a 1x3. Another cross block. Bob is very solid. A 1x5. Because we gotta actually be able to control them and move them around. And then on this side, a cross block. And another cross block. So, all very solid, the holes in the center line up. You've got a 5-stud axle going through there. We'll put a half bushing on this end. For proper spacing, we'll put a half bushing on this end. And we'll take one of these guys, with the axle holes on both sides. We'll put it on the axle hole pointing straight up and down. Okay. Now we can actually mount Bob onto the frames. 12-stud axle. Goes straight through the holes and locks onto the other side. Now it should fit exactly. And another 12-stud axle through the other set of holes. So, should move pretty smoothly across the frame. Alright. Now I'll take a 12-stud axle. Alright, take a 12-stud axle and a lever arm. Two, 3 stud beams, and we'll take a little 3-stud axle and just push that in just to hold that from spinning around, and we'll cap that off just like that. And then underneath we go 1, 2, slide everything just to the bottom. That's what's going to control turning Bob. Now, Bob needs a head. So, another one of these with the axle holes on both sides. And we're going to take a 6-stud axle and we'll center that as best we can. Got these little levers that are only 2 studs long. Just slide them on. These are actually part of a fine-tuned adjustment that was brilliantly included in this project. Again, a tip of the hat to the original designer, Akiyuki. There we go. We'll just put those together on the ends. We'll do the fine-tuning when we start mounting everything on the board. So now, Bob's arms are these 3-stud axle with an end stud on it. And that actually helps them hold the buckets nice and stably. So, if we slide Bob all the way to this end, his head goes on facing this way. So when he goes to the other side, he can turn to pick up the buckets. You'll notice he's not quite centered, but we can adjust that. The fine-tuning can be done later. Take a 8-stud axle with end stop and a cross block. So it can slide. And this goes in. Interestingly enough, I took a measurement, and that actually goes in exactly 2 studs. So we have a couple other cross blocks here we can use. 1, 2. You should just barely come over the top. That's the right measurement for that adjustment. And then we're going to take another one of these frictionless pins, put the cross axle side in, and our black cross block right there. Take a 4-stud axle. We'll put one bushing on one side. Slide this through the cross block. And a bushing on the other side. Just like that. That will drop right into our gearing system. So you can start to see how that will drive bob back and forth. For now, let's just disconnect that, now that you understand how that goes. One by 4 with holes on one side. I'm going to put a 1x2 plate. Now, these can be tricky to find. It's a 2x4 rounded roof piece. And that just mounts right here. And when you're mounting this on your board, it's going to sit roughly right about there. And the reason why is when bob comes along and everything is all lined up and in place, that's what's going to help bob to turn and make that corner as he slides back and forth. Okay, so one more small piece of structure. There we go. So now we need the part that's going to make bob go up and down when he picks up the buckets. For that, we need another 12-stud axle, and we're going to use these. So we can slide that axle into place. Put on 1 and 2. If we're going to slide in from one side, there's actually something else that has to go on first. So we'll take these with the axle hole on both sides. And we'll take this 9-stud beam and these 3-stud with end stop, or with studs on the end. So slide that on, that, just like that. And we'll do the same at the other end. Pretty sure it's the other end. We'll do the same at the other end. So 3-stud axle with a stud on the end, a bushing, just like that. So now, lift bob up, slide this underneath, and across this starts to go. These guys, 1, so it's just straight off, because that's going to be the lever that's going to make them go up and down. Second one, and that should mount flush, just like that. So then bob can bounce up and down. Oh, forgot to make something look good. You guys gotta stay on top of me. Keep that smooth. Alright, almost done. Time to pull this all together. So, we have our quick return mechanism, which, believe it or not, needs one more piece. So, cross block. The axle end goes in on a frictionless pin, and this goes into the second hole at the top. Off of this end, we need a axle extension, and we're going to use a 12M axle. Nope, not 12. We're going to use a 12M axle straight off the end. Goes in that direction. We're going to slide a 8-tooth gear on here that we're going to need later. Don't need it just yet, but it's easier to put it on now. Another axle connector. As this starts to line up, we go with a 10 stud axle. There we go. I'm getting ahead of myself here. 10 stud axle and an 8-tooth gear. And these lock on just like that. Now, on this side, we have another gearing system we're going to be adding. This is again for another component later on. It's just easier to add this now. The exact spacing is not super important just yet. It's just going to sit here. Just make sure it doesn't interfere with this lever. You'll be fine. One more axle extension. And one more 10 stud axle comes out at the end of this. Now you're probably thinking, wow, 10 studs, it sticks out so far. You know what? That's fine. There's the whole conveyor system that comes off of this later on. So that's all good. All right. Now, we have a 40-tooth gear, a 5-stud axle, which sticks actually a fair way through, and that goes right in the second hole, which interacts with that 8-tooth gear. And on this side, we have a half bushing and this as a lever. So we want to make sure it doesn't stick out. You also want to make sure that it's not too tight that it can't move. So you'll see, as this rotates, it lifts Bob up and down. Now we're not going to worry about our timing or anything between this section and this section. That's all going to be taken care of later on. So, we're almost finished. Just have a couple more things to do. We're going to pull this off for 1 sec. We're going to slide on a bushing. This is so that once the machine is set up and running, we can actually lock this gear into place and it doesn't slide out of the way. It has a tendency to want to move just because of some of the load that the machine puts on it. Alright. For ease of demonstrating this, I'm going to set this up on the board. So, let's bring in this board here. Now this board is not, you may have noticed, I don't know if you've been paying really close attention, this board is a little bit bigger than what you're going to be building this project on. So don't pay any attention to where I'm exactly mounting this. Not super important at this point because we're going to go over putting it in place later. This board's actually an old 50 by 50, which I don't even know where you can get these. I don't even know where I got this. So we're just going to lock this guy into place. There we go. Just so that we can actually move some stuff, show you how it's supposed to work, etc. Now you may or may not have seen this sitting at the end of the board. It's a 32 stud axle. Up until recently I didn't even know these things existed. So we're going to slide on 2 half bushings. And the reason why is they're a lot harder to move when there's 2 of them. And we'll slide that into here. And then on the other side, we'll do 2 more half bushings. And the ingenious part of this is it allows this to move freely without actually making Bob move, so it can continue to move without affecting the rest of the system. So we'll put this guy in. This is what helps Bob turn. what you'll find with a lot of parts of this project, just tricky to put together. So a lot of patience will be needed. You'll find ways of doing things that perhaps are better than what I'm doing. It's all the nature of the game. Alright, so we've got our timing set, remember? Up and up. We're good. We'll drop this into there. Okay. We've got one more frictionless pin. Stick there. Now, I clearly have this sitting too close, which means there's some stuff that's got to move. You know what, for the sake of just showing how this is going to be, let's just move this down the line a little bit. There we go. So, we want to make sure as this turns, see, it doesn't quite go far enough when it's pushing, it's got to push further. So, let's pull it back a little bit. There we go, it's pushing far enough. And there you go. That's how you build Bob. We'll see you on the next video. Subscribe if you want to be notified when the next video comes out, and I hope you enjoyed this build.